Well, I do like a little intro I do like a voiceover intro, so I won't like intro you here.
Yeah.
I'll just Cole.
I know that they're great. I know that much.
Yeah. I'm gonna do a very nice little system in the beginning.
Cole Walliser is a world-renowned director living in Los Angeles who got his start making female-driven beauty content for CoverGirl, Pantene, Revlon, and more. He's also worked with musical artists directing videos, tour content, and documentaries for Pink, Katy Perry, Tinashe, Selena Gomez, Cher, Britney Spears, and more. More recently, Cole has grown a huge following across social media by becoming the name associated with the highly recognized Glambot, which can be seen on every red carpet premiere, award show, and event. From the Oscars and Emmys to the Grammys and beyond, Cole's content has been seen by millions of people across the world. This is Creator Convo with Cole Walliser.
Thank you for driving all the way here. Thank you.
Yeah, dude, thanks for having me. Super
Yeah,
stoked.
I super appreciate it. I want to start with kind of your story. You grew up in Vancouver. Is that where you're originally from?
Yeah.
And so how did you, I guess, transition to LA? Was that where you first moved, or how did you?
Yeah, I mean, it's all tied into my desire to shoot and make videos, be a director, really. I had a camera in my hands through skateboarding. So I used to skateboard, used to be sponsored skateboarder like back in the day.
Oh, really?
And so I would like compete and we would shoot each other's like videos, and people would always kind of hand me the camera like, oh, Cole, you know how to like shoot good footage. So like, you shoot it. And I liked trying to figure out like how it was different if I moved the camera this way or that way, like how it affected the footage. So I was always really interested in it, and I learned how to edit back in the day. And then it came to a point, I started going to college in Vancouver, and I was like, I want to do this again, like more serious. So I bought a good camera, bought a Mac, and like really tried to learn how to shoot and edit. When I was going to school, I have a degree in psychology. And at the end of it, I was kind of like, okay, like I really like this filming stuff. I was getting tiny little gigs, and I was like, do I pursue this, or do I like stay in Vancouver? Or no, not even stay in Vancouver, but like, do I pursue this, or do I just do something else? And when I was like, let me give it a shot, let me like give it at least a couple years to like figure out if I can make something out of this as a career, I quickly realized that like, oh, if I want to be a director, I need to go to LA, because Vancouver is a huge film industry, right? But I knew that like they weren't hiring directors from Vancouver. They would always fly them up from LA. And I was like, well, if I want to do this like freelance sort of crazy pipe dream career, I want to afford myself all of the opportunities that I can. And to do that, I felt like I had to be in LA at the time. I've been in LA for like 17 years now. So this is like pre-social media. So it was like, the industry's in LA, you got to go to LA, you know?
And it was for directing.
Directing was always the goal, for sure.
Yeah. So how old were you when you came to LA?
25? Yeah.
What were you doing in Vancouver before?
So in Vancouver, I was doing little gigs. I was dancing too. I used to dance. And so I would teach dance here and there, and I'd shoot a bunch of like dance related stuff. Like studios would always like film their year-end shows, so I'd shoot and edit those, shooting little fun dance projects. So very involved in the dance community. And that's when I moved to LA. That's like the group of people that I kind of fell in with in LA. So I moved to the Valley with like where all the dance studios were. It's kind of back in the day. And that was kind of like, that was my world still is to this day to some extent, you know?
Yeah. Dance is fun to shoot, I find.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So did you have like a gimbal, or what type of gear?
Gimbals did not exist back in the day.
Like a Steadicam or anything, or not?
So there were like the Steadicams that were affordable was like this little handle with this like long stick that had weights on the bottom that would kind of keep it upright, but they were so wonky. They'd like waver so much.
The GlideCam 2000.
Yeah, exactly. That was exactly it, right? And so these are like, I had one, like, because I was like, oh, these are sweet, and it was like really hard to use effectively.
Yeah.
But like when I first moved to LA, it was like, this is before DSLR. This is before 5D even came out. So I had a Panasonic DVX100A, which was like the best mini DV camera you could get, which like shot 24 frames on mini DV, which was like a rarity. It was only a couple cameras that did that to give you more of like a cinematic look. And so when I first started working, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. When I first started working with Pink, I was like just shooting everything on mini DV tape. So I have just had this catalog of like this show, that show, like all on tape. Then you have to like digitize the tape. It was a whole process.
Yeah, I remember having to plug it into like Premiere or whatever.
Yeah.
Like import and like literally just hit play.
And like in real time. So you shoot an hour of footage. You have to sit there for an hour as this plays into the computer. No like dropping your memory card and like transferring like 20 gigs in like 5 minutes. This is not a thing back then.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
So what do you say, like Pink was your first kind of big break in the industry, or when did you know you're like, okay, this could be a viable route for me to make a living? And
that's a good question. So there's a couple of periods. There wasn't sort of some big watershed moment where I was like, aha, like this is it. I guess say for like when I bought a house making videos, like this was like, oh, I can clearly like, I found some version of success out here, right? But the very first thing that sort of like put me on the map per se, short answer, Pink, yes, I think was the person that like gave me my big break, as you would call it. But prior to Pink, I did a bunch of stuff with Miley Cyrus during like her Hannah Montana days. There were these like online dance battles that happened on YouTube like very early. And so I was friends with the choreographers for Miley Cyrus, and we were all sort of friends with, all the dancers are friends with each other back in like in LA. I mean, at least back then, I don't know how it is now necessarily. But then a bunch of dancers were in this movie Step Up 2 with John Chu directing. And we decided to do like this online dance battle with like the people from Step Up 2 versus like Miley Cyrus. Was it 2008, early YouTube days. And so I directed all of the Miley Cyrus dance videos for this dance battle saga. And this was a thing that like went viral and people were watching it and talking about it. And that was the first thing that I felt like I had done something that people may have seen that sort of like gave me confidence in my career of like, oh, I'm like doing something, you know what I mean? Because prior to that, you're like, I also had a ton of reservations about calling myself a director. My stipulation was like, if I'm not making the majority of my income from directing, like I'm not a director. I'm like an editor or doing some other thing, right? So, but because you hit the question of like, I'm a director, and they're like, well, have you done anything that I've seen? And you're like, oh, actually, like, no, you know, early in your career. But after the Miley thing, it was like, oh, I had a yes to that. Like maybe you had seen this, right? So that was the thing early in my career that kind of like gave me confidence in what I was doing. And then maybe the following year, I started working with Pink, and she really gave me like my big break. Because I was originally shooting sort of just like some content for her, but then they needed the opening video for her tour directed, and she was gonna have her, this guy Dave Byers, who's like a huge music video director, direct that, but his budget was like his big budget version of it, and they're like, we can't afford it. They're like, we have 13 grand, can you do it? And I was like, yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. So I directed the opening video for her Funhouse tour, which is like the thing that started off the whole show, which is like her burning down her house and like driving off on this motorcycle down the PCH. So that was like a big moment that she took a chance on me because I was just like a kid with a camera, really. Yeah, so the big break moment I would say would be Pink.
That's super cool. And did you film that as well, or was that you just strictly directing it?
That was, I hired a DP for that. So I sort of like, I started very much with a camera in my hands, like doing everything, shooting, editing, everything, right? But I knew like, because my goal is always to be a director, at some point you hand off the camera, you know what I mean? So whenever there was enough of a budget, I would be like, okay, I know that people like have dedicated their careers to like making images look the best. So why don't I hire a DP to do what they do the best, and I can focus on like the directing aspect. So yeah, for Pink, we hired a DP, but this is like, I mean, our crew was like 5 people. It was like a DP and then like a gaffer grip and like a set deck art person. So it was like 4 or 5 people, very, very small, but sort of like the key features of like what we would need to like make a video as good as it can be. And I think it helped having my start being like me doing everything, where I know I'm like, oh, I don't need like a ton of people, just like a couple people that do X, Y, Z to take that off my plate so I can focus on like just working with Pink and making this video the best it can be, you know?
Yeah. And I find being like knowing how to do it from the, shooting to editing, it just allows you, once you do know like, oh, I want my specialty to be just directing or whatever it may be, you can step away from the camera and be like, okay, I know now what needs to be shot. I know what's going to be used in the edit. Yeah, that helps a ton.
100%. I think like, because when I first moved to LA, I couldn't get jobs directing. I was predominantly just editing stuff. And I feel like my experience as an editor really helped my directing, because I would be on set and we would like be getting shots, and like I would know like, okay, that's a usable take and that's a usable take, like we can move on. So it was like really helpful thinking about the editorial process on set. I think you just work so much more effectively, and like you can zone in and you can spend time where you need to, but also you can stop doing something because you have it already, So, and I generally think that for a director, the more you know about every department on set, the better you're gonna be. Like the more I know about like makeup and styling and fashion, it's like I'm better empowered and enabled to like make the decisions to like stop wasting time. Just be like yes to that, no to that, because I understand like whatever, I mean, to the best of my ability, like whatever they're doing, it really helps. And when you're talking about someone that's like helming a direction, a project, and like giving direction to all departments,
Yeah, that's super helpful. Yeah. So how did you, I'd say now, obviously with the sensation of the Glambot, and even if you Google Glambot or anything, it's like you're the inventor or the pioneer of it. So how did that come to be such a, what was your invention of it or association?
So I didn't actually invent the Glambot, right? So this is a thing that just people just say because I'm sort of like the only one that does it. But I didn't invent it. The camera system itself is used in food commercials. So when you see like a Coke pour and the camera like whips around in slow motion, this is what the camera system's for. So the Glambot is all done by E Entertainment, and they did like a camera test with this system on a person, and they're like, oh, this is kind of cool. We need a director to come in that knows how to shoot beauty, knows and understands movement, and has worked with like A-listers to like tackle directing all these people that are going to come up. So at that point in my career, this is 2016 when I first started the Glambot, I had, obviously I'd worked with Pink, and I'd gone on to work with like Katy Perry and Cher, and a bunch of other people. I'd then also done a bunch of beauty stuff. Like Pink became a CoverGirl. She brought me in, so I started doing a bunch of stuff with CoverGirl. Then I did a bunch of beauty stuff in general with like Pantene, Revlon, and like all these other like beauty brands. And then my history in dance too. I've done movement and choreography sort of most of my career. And I had worked with one of the producers like 8 years prior. And they were like trying to figure out like what director would be good. And like, oh, I think Cole would be really good. He sort of checks all these boxes that we need. So they brought me in for a meeting. I met everybody, and they're like, all right, cool. Like, let's try it. Let's figure it out. You know what I mean? So my first one was the Emmys in 2016. And this is when Stranger Things just came out. And so the kids were like, were walking. I mean, now they've since grown up, but at the time they're just like their first carpet. They were walking down. They saw the thing. They came up and they did a Glambot. And this clip just went like super viral. And I was like, oh, like maybe this is a thing. And for a long time, it was me just showing up 4 or 5 times a year at different award shows, purely as a director, like just trying to get the best slow motion videos, really explaining what it was because people weren't really familiar with it. And it wasn't until maybe 2019, 2020 that I sort of realized that the behind the scenes was like a cool thing. And I started like actively bringing cameras on set, miking myself to like film this additional content. And since then, it just like has totally blown up.
Yeah, that's super cool. And in terms of the technicality of it, because a lot of people that watch this are, they are videographers or editors or whatever. So is it a techno crane, or what's the technical jib? And
it's a motion control arm, right? So there's a bunch of different companies that sort of have these. The one that we use is called a Cinebolt, which is it's basically like those robotic car building arms repurposed for like camera movements. And so you basically, it's this arm that can move quickly. You program in 3D space, and we basically set different positions, and we whip this camera as fast as we can, as far as we can, based on how the arm works. At the end of the arm, there's a Phantom Flex 4K, which shoots at 1,000 frames a second in 4K. So we're shooting a huge amount of footage, super, super slow-mo, and we launch this camera. We shoot 1,000 frames in like 1.5 in a second. So from there, an editor will like edit these things and do speed ramps and make them all sweet. But that's the equipment. It's a giant robotic arm and a super slow motion high speed camera, basically.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah.
And what type of, are you using like a wide 18mm lens, or what are you trying?
We vary the lensing a little bit. Generally, we're on the wider end. We anywhere from like 20 to 25. For a long time, we were shooting on a 21mm. We were using Leica Summilux. Leica Summilux C lenses. We had a 21mm. We've tried a bunch. We shot like anamorphic one year. We've been shooting on ARRI Ultra Primes as of late. So but that's kind of the the focal length is 20 to 25 mil. So wide-ish, but not like super, super wide, you know?
And are you just setting a focus?
Oh, it's all programmed in the robot, right? So obviously, right, when the camera starts like back here and it moves forward and we're focusing Talon up there, you need to like rack focus. So this is all built in 3D space where like the system knows where the camera is, and it'll set a focus point, and then as it moves forward, it'll just rack the focus. So we set focus marks and we'll like check it so everything is like always sharp.
So you don't have the world's fastest AC.
No, yeah, just throwing in real time. I mean, that would be hilarious.
Yeah.
And we've done stuff where like, you know, we've done other versions where we're moving cameras in different ways, and so we have done it where people are racking focus, but it just ends up like being super repeatable where like, you get stuck in a box a little bit where, okay, camera's moving exactly 12 feet, so they just have markers and they just try to like match the time. It works well enough because also talent's like never exactly on the right spot. So there's all these like factors that make, it's almost sometimes it's like surprising that they all come out so well because there's so many things that can sort of like go wrong in like this 1 second moment. But thankfully, you know, knock on wood, generally we do a pretty good job at nailing it the first try. So
that's what's fun about seeing behind the scenes too, where I guess the directing comes in is making sure you can be like, oh, here's the mark. Like, could you stand on the mark? Or if someone wants to jump or do an action, just try to do it here, or else you won't be in focus and all of that.
Totally. There's like, I'll do an event and we'll shoot like over 100 glam bots, and then I've done 5 events for the past like 7 years. So I've obviously shot a ton of these, and I've thought about what sort of goes through my head as I'm sort of explaining these. And there's almost like 3 levels of like my thought process, right? So I'm thinking about like what I'm explaining to them. Like the first level of like, hey, like safety thing, camera's gonna move, like we want to figure out what you do. The second level is like me thinking about what camera move, like as I'm explaining stuff, I'm thinking about like what camera move I'm gonna do based on what they're gonna do, and I'm trying to get a sense of like what they're gonna move. And then it's like the third thing is just sort of like trying to sort out, I mean, it's just sort of like the intuition of like how to make this an appeasable moment for both of us, you know what I mean? I'm trying to just be like kind and friendly to this whole situation. So there's like levels of like what I'm thinking, and it's become second nature, but like I've thought about it a lot, just of like what is going through my head, and these are basically the 3 things that sort of like rack my brain as I'm like, oh, like it's a high-speed camera. This, I'm like watching them to figure out how they're gonna move. I'm trying to understand like how the best like what the best movement they can do is, what the best camera movement in relation to it, all the while just being like, maybe you should spin. You know what I mean? Like trying to figure out the best thing. So there's a lot going on in each moment. For each person. Yeah.
And how many movements do you have programmed? Because I sometimes it's like, oh, a high push or whatever, you know. So.
I love the high push.
Yeah.
We typically have, well, so I'll have 9 to 12 every show, right? But there's always some movements that end up just feeling better and just more dynamic, and like depending on it depends on like what we're looking at, like where everybody is in relation, like what's happening in the background often like dictates like which side of the robot, because the base is like here, and then the arm can come from like either side. So there's places that the camera can't go because it's like it's gonna hit itself. And then so typically one side will work a little bit better, and then like a high thing or a low thing kind of works a little bit better. And for whatever reason this year, like the high push was just fire. So I just kept going back to it. And then plus the environment is so crazy and busy that like I'll direct one and we'll do it and like, okay, it was good. And then literally someone like walks up into the spot. And so I could take a second to be like, hey, like, why don't we do this other move? Then Chris, the robot operator, will have to like reposition it and then like move it again so the talent can see where the camera's gonna go. It just takes more time. And so you actually can save a lot of time by just being like, hey, run it back, do a high push.